Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Steven Hour, and we are back with another 007 movie review. Yes, indeed. We are reviewing the last Bond film of the 70s. It is 1979's Moonraker. Now, let's quickly get back into the background. After the release of the previous Bond film, The Spy Who Loved Me, back in 77, the filmmakers originally wanted the next film to be For Your Eyes Only, which was said at the end of the film. But however, just like I said in the previous video, the Star Wars franchise exploded in popularity. As a result, sci-fi films were popular. And as a result, the filmmakers decided, well, let's send Bond to space. So instead, they were going to adapt Moonraker, which was a Bond novel, but was loosely adapted, and was completely different in the source material to what essentially the film would be. Les Gilbert, who directed The Spy Who Loved Me, returned to direct Moonraker, his third and final Bond film. Roger Moore was also brought back as Bond. He originally signed a 3-film deal, but however, the audience liked him so much they decided to bring Roger Moore back, and as a result, for further films, he will be essentially, would be contracted to do a film-by-film basis. So such as he'll be contracted to do this one film, and for his next contract, he'll be conducted to that film, and that went on until eventually he just had enough, or he felt that it was time for him to step down. Also, certain other people returned for this film. The film was released, and although it was a huge hit at the box office, being very popular, it was criticized for being too over the top, and for most modern Bond fans, it is considered one of the worst or weakest films in the series. So the question is, how do I feel about it? Well, before we get into the actual, full review, let's get to the cast. Of course, Roger Moore returns here in the role of 007. The Bond girl for this film is Dr. Holly Goodhead, portrayed by Lois Chills. Hopefully that is pronounced right. We also have the return of Jaws, portrayed by Richard Kiel. The main villain for the film is Hugo Drax, portrayed by Michael Losdale, and this character appeared in the novel. We have Corina Dufour, portrayed by Corina Callery. Again, hopefully these names are being pronounced right. We also here have Emily Bolton playing Manula. Hopefully that name is pronounced right, and it's basically an MI6 contact. We also here have Toshiro Saga portraying Chang. Hopefully that name is pronounced right. I'm not trying to be racist, but I do have trouble saying people's names. And we have Colonel Scott, portrayed by actor Mike Marshall. Rounding out the rest is Bernard Lee as M for the last time. We have Jeffrey Keane as Sir Frederick Gray, basically a supporting character that was in the previous film and would be pretty much up until The Living Daylights. Desmond Llewellyn is back as Q. We have General Gogol, portrayed by Walter Gotell. Lois Maxwell is back as Moneypenny, and here we have, Dolly, portrayed by Blanche Ravolac. Hopefully that actress's name was pronounced right, and basically she is Jaws' love interest. Yeah, Moonraker is gonna be a pretty over-the-top one, but let's get into the film. The film begins with the usual Bond gun barrel, and then we are cut to a scene where the British Air Force is transporting a rocket named Moonraker, only for the rocket to be hijacked up in mid-air and essentially ends up causing a plane wreckage. As a result, M is informed about the incident and calls up and basically goes to Moneypenny and tells her where is Bond. And she says he's on his last leg. We then see Bond in an airplane where he's making out with the hostess, only for her to pull a gun on him and another henchman come out and essentially destroy the controls open the plane, attempting to throw Bond out without a parachute. This causes a fight where the henchman who was wearing a parachute is pushed out, and eventually Bond himself is pushed out by Jaws, who is back once again, portrayed by Richard Kiel, making him the only Bond henchman to return for another Bond film portrayed by the same actor. And then we got to this very well choreographed and great scene with essentially Bond skydiving without a parachute, and he's skydiving to this hood, the thug, to steal his parachute. Now this is done for real. There was no CGI. This was done for real, with skydivers, and it took them I was told like at least 4 weeks to do. Anyway, Bond gets the parachute, kicks the thug out of the air, and puts his parachute on. George is skydiving just above Bond and soon, tries to apprehend Bond, only for Bond to quickly at the last minute pull the cord and the parachute comes out and he is essentially in safety. Jaws tries doing the same thing, only he rips the cord out, and as a result, he flies like a chicken and literally lands on top of a circus. And then, of course, we go into the film's song. That sequence, for me, was good up until that moment. I understand that that the Roger Moore films are more over the top, more comedic, but that just felt. And I will admit, I did get a chuckle of that the first time I saw it, but years later, I find it to be almost too eye-rolling. Anyway, we then go into the main song, Moonraker, sung by Shirley Bassey, returning for another Bond score. But this is arguably one of her most weakest songs. I'm not saying that she's a bad singer by any stretch, but this is just one of my least favorite songs that she's done. And it just doesn't feel all grand like it should be. Anyway, when that song is over, we then cut to Bond coming to MI6 HQ, the usual Moneypenny scene, and then he meets Frederick Gray, Q, and M, and is informed that the shuttle was that they've made an official report or publicly that it was an air crash that both destroyed the plane and the Moonraker, but in actuality, only the plane was destroyed and the rocket wasn't. Now they have to have a thorough investigation, and the best place to start is Drax Industries, owned by Hugo, which is owned by Hugo Drax. And just as Bond is about to leave, Q gives him his latest gadget, a wristwatch that can fire darts by doing a hand gesture in which the watch will sense the nerve impulses and fire a dart. Of course, we get a usual Bond joke, Roger Moore over the top joke or a gag, to test out the gadget, which I admit I did get a bit of laugh out of. Bond then leaves for his assignment. Bond makes his way to Padius, where he goes to the Drax Industries, where he meets characters that will essentially serve a purpose for the film. He first meets Corina, the helicopter pilot, and Max and Hugo Drax's assistant. He then, of course, meets Hugo Drax himself and his henchman Chang. And then, of course, he then visits Dr. Holly Goodhead. And all of this is interwoven in a good scene. And for me, this is all interwoven so nicely. The helicopter scene where we're going through our, the corporation, where we see, the grounds, the whole thing is just so beautiful, so stunning. Drax, I will admit, is a pretty lame villain, I gotta be honest. And he just plays the role almost too calmly. Like he sees himself as a god, which is nothing wrong, but I just feel like something just could have been done better with it. And Dr. Holly Goodhead, of course, one of my favourite Bond girls, and I just like how she plays off with a Bond in some scenes. There's, of course, Bond, of course, does get involved in a few death traps, such as putting this, Geoforce simulator with a chicken switch, which is used to test how, long they could withhold the intensity of the Geoforce. but of course it's slightly rigged by Chang in order to kill Bond. And this is one of the few times where Bond almost doesn't get out of, and it's a pretty gruesome way to go. And Bond is just saved just in time by his gadget, which I find to be a really good scene. As of course Bond does some investigating work around Hugo Drax's estate, and of course he ends up seducing Corina. Of course, and when he finally leaves Drax's estate, because he stayed over there for like a few days, he managed to survive a death trap by one of Drax's guys in hiding, almost about to shoot Bond, but Bond shoots him. And of course Corina, for essentially betraying Drax, has her killed by getting mauled by dogs, which is a pretty dark way to go. Of course, Bond actually goes into Bond is next in Venice, where we get to see a bit of the scenery, and a bit of the scenery, and we get to see Bond in a boat chase around Venice in this I guess it's we know those Venice boats. Yeah, it turns into this gadget, and what was originally a chase by Bond just steering, it then becomes a hovercraft, and it's just so silly, over the top. There's a double take pigeon. It's just so silly. It's so out there. Yeah. Bond, of course, then does more investigating at this museum, where he gets into a fight with Chang, which he wins victoriously by essentially fighting him by punching him out a window, and he falls to his death over the top by literally going through a piano. And of course Roger Moore has one of his classic one-liners, "Play it again, Sam." But then he does some more investigating, finding out that Dr. Holly Goodhead is actually a CIA agent. And even though she says she is staying a few days, he can see that she's about to leave. Bond does more investigating and finds the secret laboratory, which is having this nerve gas. And of course an accident happens when the gas comes out, kills these scientists, but the animals remain unharmed. Bond then calls in M and everyone else, and Sir Frederick Grey to come and investigate, but of course the laboratory is gone. And Frederick, feeling embarrassed, says sorry to Drax, about the whole thing, and orders M to have Bond off the case. M says he has no choice but to comply with what he says, but then Bond shows what he found at the laboratory, and M, seeing some truth into what Bond is saying, then immediately plans to get it to Q to, to really investigate it more. And Bond plans to make his way to another place to do some more investigating, but M says to be more undercover more than ever now, or they are both in trouble. This is what I've always liked about Bernal-Lee's M. He can be that grumpy boss, but he sees value in his agents and values what they find and all that. Even though I always felt that his M worked better with Sean Connery and George Lazenby, I do admit he did have his moments where he shined with Roger Moore. Bond then makes his way to this new place to do some investigating work, where he meets up with a undercover contact. Manula. Hopefully that name is pronounced right. I don't want to get in trouble. But of course, just as that happening, Drax has to calls up one of his associates to get a new, essentially, henchman. And guess who that henchman is? Jaws, who had survived his fall from the on the circus at the beginning of the film. And that scene with him going through airport, he goes through the metal detector, the guard stops him, has to get all the metal out. All he did is smile, revealing his teeth, and the guard just stepped back and lets him go through. It's a funny scene. I absolutely love it. Bond, of course, then gets to a fancy hotel, gets a fancy room, seduces Manua, and essentially they do some investigation at night, where they find, rocket fuel, all this stuff that has been hiding out here, and it clearly is a front for, Hugo Drax. And of course they do have an encounter with Jaws in a very silly way, with him dressed up in this ridiculous costume. And of course Bond and Miller win out victoriously, and Bond says she's, it's enough for her, he's going to continue on alone. The next day we find Bond at this observatory, observing pretty much the whole city, which is a beautifully shot. It is beautiful. And of course he runs into Dr. Holly Goodhead. They then take on one of the elevator cars down like this cable rope, where it is then stopped, and it's all done by Jaws and a fellow associate. Bond and him get into a scuffle, which is kind of ruined a bit by the blue screen in some scenes, but when they're, for the up close scenes, but when it's out back, it is done ever so beautifully. And of course it ends with an over the top joke when Bond and Holly escape and Jaws crashes with the cart through to this sort of cafe below, where he meets Dolly, the love of his life. It's essentially, it's a sort of like a romance build. It's so corny, it's so cheesy, so ridiculous. And then again, but you gotta understand, this film is going for the over-the-top, no-hole-boundary lunacy that the film was going for. Just as Bond and Dr. Holly Goodhead land on the ground, they are then captured by ambulance, who come out of nowhere, chuck him in an ambulance, and Bond quickly makes his escape out of the ambulance, but leaves Dr. Holly Goodhead behind, although I don't think that was his intention. He was planning to get them both out. I'm kind of concerned why they're taking you to the base. What you should have done is gone with them, but anyway, so I said, Bond then ends up in, like, I guess Mexico? Or, and is at this, monastery, which is an MI6 front, where we get to see Moneypenny again, M again, Q testing out all these new gadgets, all over the top, silly. It's always fun to see those scenes. And then it's revealed that the gas that was used earlier in the film is actually derived from an extinct plant that's long been extinct, and only found in this, like, a sort of forest. And Bond has to go there, and he takes Q's specialized boat, which results in a chase by Drax's men and Jaws, who is still alive. And of course it ends with an over-the-top scene when Jaws and the henchmen going down a waterfall, but Bond escaping at the last minute by using a hang glider. He then glides into the forest and then makes his way to this cavern where he's surrounded by beautiful women, only to be laced into a trap by being being trapped in the water and being strangled to death by a python. Bond, of course, gets out of it by using, surprisingly, a gadget from Goodhead, a pen, and ends up killing the snake, gets out, and when he looks up, he sees Jaws, who is alive and well, and quickly grabs him, and then they are taken to Drax. We then see this really fantastic set, this control center, and it's revealed that Drax stole his shuttle back because one of his shuttles broke down and he didn't have the time to repair it, so had to hijack one of his own. And it's clear what his plan is to do. He plans to him and all the selected people he's chosen to go to space, to live on the space station, and then chuck all these gases down to Earth, essentially wiping out the human population, only having the plant life and animal life survive. Once the gas is cleared up, he and his people will then go back down to Earth and repopulate it, freeing it of crime and corruption, and essentially, fixing, essentially living in a utopia in his image. If this plot sounds familiar, well, it should. That's kind of the exact same thing Stromberg wanted to do, but instead of under the sea, space is the theme. Bond is then taken to Dr. Holly Goodhead, where they plan to be essentially roasted alive, as they are underneath the rocket where the, fire comes out. Goodhead and Bond make their escape. They quickly knock out a few guards, take their costumes, and quickly jump on a spaceship and fly the rocket up to the space station up in space, which is a fantastic design. It is absolutely fantastic. Despite the over-the-top lunacy this film presents, it is absolutely visually stunning. Absolutely stunning. The rocket then gets up to the space station, they jump aboard, and when they do, they essentially go to the station that is jamming, sending out a jamming signal so they can't be detected from space. They sabotage it, essentially getting the Americans, involved, finding out the space station. They shot up. And we also, during this moment, we get a little cameo from General Goebel, who is down, saying that the satellite up there is not from them, and if it's not been taken care of, the Americans will be held personally responsible for the incident. Okay, so it's a nice little scene we get of him. He's and General Goebel's always fun to see. And just as this is happening, Bond and Goodhead are captured by Jaws, who take him to Drax. And of course, also up there is Dolly, Jaws' girlfriend. And Bond finds more so about the plot, even though we kind of already figured it out by now. But Drax says that he's had special selected people to come up here, who he feels are perfect. Then Bond reveals, and if there's anyone who doesn't live up to his physical standards, will be exterminated. Jaws and Dolly hear this, and they find out that they're not physically attractive. This recall forces Jaws to turn essentially his back on Drax and tries to double-cross him, only for it not to go out so well. Bond and Dr. Holly Goodhead then cause more sabotage, and essentially a fight breaks out, both in space with the American astronauts versus Drax's astronauts, and of course a fight inside. The astronauts then make their way into the space station, and a fight breaks out. But a few of these pods with the deadly gas have already been fired. Bond eventually manages to take down the rest of Drax's goons. A firefight breaks out, kind of similar to the fight in in the Spy Who Loved Me, with all the good guys battling all the bad guys. It feels very repetitive. Of course, Bond then gets his drop on Drax by using his dart watch, which fires into Drax. Just when Drax feels like he's about to have the upper hand to take down Bond, the dart fires into Drax. He then steps into an airlock, and he is sent out into space. A very colourful way for him to go out, and very fitting for a space-themed villain. With the space station pretty much being destroyed, Bond, Dr. Goodhead, and all the Americans quickly get the hell out of there before the space station blows up. The space station blowing up will destroy the current AirPods and will remain harmless, but they need to quickly destroy the other ones that are heading to Earth. They quickly make their way out with the help of Jaws and Dolly, who still reveals to be alive. And, believe it or not, Jaws says something. He says a few lines. Well, here's to us. And yes, Jaws and her do survive. Bond then quickly, with a lot of tension mounting, and very on the edge of his seat moment, him destroying like these pods that are going down to Earth. And I admit, it's done really well, and you can really see the tension really building up. Bond, of course, then win victoriously. There is then a call down at the space station down in America, where they'll have a feed to the White House congratulating Bond, Dr. Goodhead on their good work. They then tune in to Bond and Goodhead when it's revealed that they are having a moment in space, in gravity, and I just love the line when they said, "Oh, what's Bond doing?" And Q says, "I think he's attempting re-entry, sir." It's a funny moment. The film then ends with Dr. Goodhead telling Bond, "Can you take me around the Earth one more time?" And then essentially we end it there, with Bond essentially returning for another installment. Moonraker, considered by many to be one of the worst Bond films in the series. How do I personally feel about it? Well, the good things about this film is the special effects and just how it's shot. It's a beautifully stunning film. It is definitely over the top, and it's definitely very cartoony. And this is a clear example of when you go too far overboard into absurdity. Roger Moore is still perfect in the role. Dr. Goodhead for me is one of my favourite Bond girls, essentially a CIA agent, and I feel that the actress is far better in this than the previous one, because I always felt the actress playing Agent Triple X was always wooden in her delivery. Dr. Goodhead was always great to me. Jaws returning is also a nice, good, fresh change of pace. He's portrayed more comedically than menacing in the previous outing, but it makes sense. You can't really repeat stuff too much until the point it gets bored, so I like that the way they went. I would have preferred without the love storyline they gave him, but it made him more human, so I can't really say it was a bad thing. This film is just weird, and I always felt that Drax was a very weak villain, not that great, and and honestly, this film is just pretty much The Spy Who Loved Me, but more over the top. Hell, the main villains are kind of similar. They're directed by the same person who does the same thing, even though it is visually stunning. it is definitely far too over the top that really only a certain group of Bond fans would probably enjoy it. If you want something more absurdity and too over the top, then this would be good. But for those Bond fans who will rather have a more serious, a more spy thriller type film, then I don't think you're going to have a good time with this. However, I will admit, the special effects are absolutely fantastic. It's visually stunning. The opening stunt to this film are some of my favorites in the series. With the release of Moonraker, it pretty much, yeah, so that's what I can say. If you're really into the more cheesy, light-hearted films, this one would be good. If not, I recommend maybe something else. The release of Moonraker was a really big hit at the box office. It came one of the most highest grossing films in the franchise, and it was made at a very large budget at the time, although that budget has probably been surpassed now by No Time to Die. Even though the film was a huge commercial hit and was praised for its cinematography and use of special effects, it was heavily criticized for being too over the top and too silly. And so the producers agreed that for the next film, they needed to bring Bond down to earth in For Your Eyes Only, which will be the next Bond film we'll be recovering. And that's it. That's the review of Moonraker. For me, a very over-the-top, very cartoony, silly film. The only people that will really enjoy it are those who are into its zaniness and over-the-topness. However, I really will praise this film for great with its special effects and cinematography, as it is a beautifully stunning looking film. And this has been the Steven Hour, and until next time, so long for now.